Our next speaker will be Mr. Bobby Sakaki from all the way from Utah, United States. And the company that he is presenting is UAS Nexus. So he sent his presentation last night, so let's make it here.
Friends, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with so many of you. It's a great honor and a privilege. I wanted to share my thoughts today on the global drone industry. I'll break it up into a few different sections. The first is the United States. The second is Europe. The third is China. The fourth I'll kind of group into the rest of the world. Special exceptions for Australia. But unfortunately, the drone industry, which has historically been a very globally distributed and connected industry, has gone through some real fragmentation, more fragmentation as a result of some geopolitical manifestations, both in the West and abroad. Different administrations from different countries taking different approaches to trade. And this, we've actually seen a shifting of, products like drones being developed outside of China since, well before the second Trump administration. Like, for example, the friends in India who've had a made in India policy for quite some time. So this shift, this very strong shift away from China is actually accelerating more so because now we're looking for a indigenous domestic supply chain. That's putting pressure on many different countries and nation states to kind of develop their own technologies within their own borders. So this, sovereign development of this technology is being really perpetuated and very pronounced in a few different regions. I'll talk about the United States first. The U.S. is kind of leading the way with its own Made in America approach, not just the NDAA and the Blue UAS program, but more recently some directives related to the FCC certification of products and actually the classification of all foreign-made components, not just Chinese. This is difficult and puts pressure on OEMs, whether they're European or Australian or Chinese or Taiwanese or Vietnamese, Korean, Japanese, etc. It's really going to be putting some pressure on the already strained supply chain. And this was before this whole issue that's happening with Iran and other stuff. I'll get to that in a moment. America's search for Made in America product is not really, I think, based on trying to achieve product parity. It's just trying to achieve self-reliance and building its own industrial base for this technology. And then later, I think focusing on catching up. I heard someone tell me very thoughtfully, we don't really care about the drone industry. It's about national security. So I'd say that's, very honest tell about the state of things here in the States. What you're going to see is more countries try and build products in the United States, depending on the type of technology, but keeping the best stuff for themselves, most likely. We've seen that with Taiwan and their own semiconductors, etc. And America will go down its own path. I think we'll start seeing some companies being added to different American programs of record. Like you look at, this SRR, MRR, other types of opportunities. Sorry, it's been cloudy, but the light's been changing a bit. Drone dominance program, other types of opportunities in the United States are going to start fueling an industry here, or companies moving from other countries to the United States or establishing joint ventures. But really, I think the biggest opportunities are probably in Europe for two reasons. And I'm not actually talking about the Ukrainian products, many of which are built on Chinese components, and those that are not are few and far between, but also the Ukrainian battlefield demonstrates like the real commoditization of this hardware. You can buy flight controllers and radio links and cameras, and they're really driving the demand for this technology in a way that is disproportionately being developed in China versus Europe. So what you're seeing is European countries and companies alike establishing opportunities in Ukraine through joint ventures. We look at Quantum Frontline Systems, We look at what Auterion has done. We look at many other companies in the space, really just trying to bridge that gap. Or more recently, Power Us, a publicly traded or soon to be publicly traded company in the United States. These European companies, in my opinion, have some demonstrable edges. First of all, their products have been proven on the battlefield, which is very important. Second is they've been able to kind of refine and establish their manufacturing processes in a way that are good. That's a refined solution. Many of these OEMs, and I'm not talking about the Ukrainians in particular, I'm thinking about the Quantum Systems, the Starks, the Techovers, the larger firms, or these new era of neoprimes that are able to build very impressive product and immediately deploy them to the battlefield that are more competitive than what the Shield AIs, the Andurils, the Skydios, and the Red Cats, etc. here in the United States are doing. So that's very important to keep in mind, is their proximity to Ukraine, and their I would say their shared national interests with Ukraine and protecting them from creating a buffer for Russia, is really fueling a level of innovation that doesn't really exist in the United States to the same degree. I think it's starting to accelerate. I'm very bullish on the Scandinavian countries establishing their own capabilities. Many of the Finnish are global leaders in optics and sensors. Hopefully, I'll get to meet many of you at some point in person, and we can do some business together. And not just in optics and sensors, but cellular communications, other core technologies. Finland, Scandinavia, in general, will, I believe, become a pillar of the drone industry, global drone industry. Hopefully, creating their own NDA compliant solutions. As an American, I'd love to be able to buy them, but also at the same time, really offering a level of engineering expertise that is hard to find in Europe and other parts of the world. Eastern Europe, Central Europe have been very key players in the space. Slovakia, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Croatia. Probably every country in that sector and region has to some degree has very strong, or I would say comparable, drone capabilities to the United States, if not maybe better when it comes to core technologies. And I think that is important for us to kind of establish and build our own ecosystem around and learn from the Europeans. At the same time, I do see the United Kingdom investing enormous amounts of resources in their own efforts. I see the French, as you can see with Harmattan, investing and kind of subsidizing their own homegrown efforts of UAS. And obviously the Swiss are continuing to develop really incredible technology through their research universities. Something I do want to bring up very clearly is, despite the awfulness and madness of war kind of driving the demand for this technology, it's hopefully short-lived, but there's still collectively much more money to be made outside of defense in mobile robotics and drones than there is in making defense products. In the short term, the biggest opportunities are likely going to lay in the defense applications of drones, which we can talk about towards the end of this chat. But these geopolitical forces that are happening, the instabilities, they're driving a lot of mass commoditization of some of these technologies, because they have to be built in such large volumes. So they don't need to have as much differentiation. Think of it as like ammunition, right? Some people have certain preferences of certain brands of bullets. I think they all kind of do the same thing. This is really how I think we need to be viewing this technology. The rest of the world is kind of unique with their own opportunities. We have a few folks in Africa, both South Africa and Northern Africa, building very unique capabilities. Obviously, Zipline was very active in Rwanda and other parts of the world. I do believe that Africa's flexible airspace regulation will allow for a lot of innovation for beyond visual line of sight capabilities, and also the real demand for, say, like anti-poaching, agriculture, like the real, in my opinion, society-changing technologies are likely to be able to be tested and developed in Africa or South America and other parts of the developing world. As for Asia, I see a lot of the Asian countries that are not tied to China as being very strongly incentivized to build for the United States and Europe. Japan, Korea, Vietnam, Taiwan already, mostly Malaysia, Singapore, and really the ability to build their own. Those nations don't are moving towards their own sovereign capabilities, but many of them have their own strengths and weaknesses when it comes to core critical technology. I don't know if one nation outside of China or maybe even Taiwan has the ability to kind of build everything themselves, full stack. That's going to be globally competitive without any help. And this is in the short term. In the long term, I think it will change. As for China themselves, listen, as we're seeing, they're not slowing down. They're continuing to build and innovate at a very impressive rate. The West is going to be having a strong amount of difficulty to stop, newer products, their own enormous supply chain and stockpiling of different capabilities. It's going to take, I've said this for years, a geopolitically coordinated effort between the different Western countries to try and offset China. And given the fragmentation that's happening in the world, I don't see that happening anytime soon. Hopefully, many of my European friends will be able to purchase the latest and greatest DJI products pretty easily and accessibly. Enjoy them. Tell me how they are. I'll be watching your YouTube videos. But as for now, many of us are just looking at the two biggest opportunities in the space: defense and, more notably, counter UAS. These interceptor drones that are meant to stop these Iranian shaheeds, they're built in the same supply chain as FPVs, and they're as commoditized in the same way. So they're using the same spec motors to the same degree, propellers, terminal guidance, software often based on some open source database. And they're all using open source flight stacks. So this is important for us to kind of keep in mind. I did, unfortunately, not get to mention Australia, so I'm glad I got to bring them up. With the exception of China, I would say Zurich and Australia, or Switzerland and Australia, are probably some most impactful global leaders in drone technology. Not just because of their, research universities, but just the whole coordination and their own nexus of technology that they've built there either through, like, say, Ardu Pilot in Australia, PX4 in Switzerland, and the Chinese with their just crazy robust supply chain and access to robotics and investment in the education system there. So the global drone industry, you're going to see in the short term a large rush of money going after defense dollars. Neoprime companies like Anduril, Quantum Systems, Stark, etc., will either be chasing the same dollars or they'll be acquiring the smaller companies. The same thing, would apply to Ondas and PDW, Red Cat, and Neros, right? Neros maybe to a bit of a separate degree. This defense space is its own little sector, and eventually these technologies will start to harden and refine, and they'll be kind of, exclusively ITAR restricted, so they'll just live in this defense space. While the rest of us will get to return to developing newer types of platforms for, say, agriculture and whatnot. One important note when it comes to defense: the only difference between ISR and search and rescue is the target. So we're using the same core technologies, etc., but how we use this technology really matters, which is why I really emphasize and I'm hopeful that we'll see that drones will be used for a new way to help us clean the air, detect air quality, grow crops to higher yields, check water quality, help keep our communities safer, without the need for some sort of defense application. Anyway, greatly appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so many of you for being here today. It's an absolute honor, and thank you.